Right. Oh, what's up, guys? Hope you're feeling alive right now. I'm Micah Keneally.
And I'm Josiah Keneally. We're your hosts. Thanks for tuning into the Young Adults Today podcast, where we talk about reaching the next generation in our world today. We drop new episodes every Monday morning to help you start your week off strong. So thank you for sharing this with your friends and leaders. It helps us reach the message of Young Adults Today to more listeners. And we're joined today by Steve Shadrach. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, if you are just tuning in and you do not know who Steve is, I have his whole little bio right here. And he's the founder of Support Raising Solutions and the founder of the Center of Mission Mobilization, also CMM, which is the parent ministry of SRS. And Steve has trained thousands of Christian workers. I love this, from over 1,200 organizations around the world to raise support. Wow. And just through the God ask, right? Asking God to give us a dream, give us a burden. And when he does, we need the funds to do that. So he has written some material of how to support people who are doing the fundraising, who are just doing amazing things for God. And his wife is named Carol, and they are in Arkansas, and they have 5 growing children and 8 grandchildren. Congrats on those grandbabies.
Thank you. Number 9 is on the way.
That is awesome. Make it an even 10, right? No.
Yeah. Oh, no, we're going for double digits for sure.
There we go. I love it.
Well, we're having fun today, Steve, and thanks for joining us for your time. Like Micah mentioned, you've probably come across the book, The God Ask. If not, The Fuel and the Flame, you've probably heard of or read. And if you haven't, please check it out. They're both amazing. We were just recording, and our last guest said, "Who's next?" And we said, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's like the fundraising Bible." And so we know that God's used you in some pretty incredible ways. And we're going to encourage the listener, if you have a dream from God, I just believe this conversation is going to be for you. And Steve, can you just tell us some of the dreams that God's given you and some of your life story and journey of leadership along the way?
Sure. Thank you. I grew up in Dallas in a church thinking I was a Christian, which is pretty common for, especially from the South in Texas, I ran into a campus staff person that befriended me and took me out to the airport to teach me how to share my faith, thinking I was a Christian. And lo and behold, it went terrible. But in the final analysis, I realized I had never received Christ. And so I was an 18-year-old brand new believer and came to college, not planning to, go through Rush or be a part of a fraternity. But within a week or two was joining a fraternity and lived in that house for 3 years. And really, it was 3 of the greatest years of spiritual growth I've really ever had. And it became a mission field for me. And I realized that those fraternity boys, I'll just call them hellions, if you don't mind. When they come to Christ, the same zeal they were putting into the party life is now the same zeal they were putting into following Christ. And they instantly had a network of relationships that they wanted to reach out to and influence for the Lord as well. So that really got my attention, and it really solidified in me that I think I wanted to spend the rest of my life really going after college students primarily and trying to win them to Christ, to disciple them, equip them to be witnesses and disciple makers themselves, but also become world changers. I took a course a few years later called Perspectives on the World Christian Movement, and it so turned my world upside down, and I realized that evangelism is essential, disciple making is essential, but we better not leave out that third component. And so we kind of do it. We call it EDM, not electronic dance music, but evangelism, disciple making, and missions mobilization is kind of the final piece. And so trying to help each campus worker out there across the planet really to see their campus as a launching pad, as a sending base to reach the whole world. And so that's that was a pretty foundational experience for me there in college. And so a big part of my life has been college ministry, and I'm almost 68. No, I don't look at that. We're 67, but So that's kind of part of my story.
I absolutely love that. Steve, thank you for sharing that. And we know the power of one life transformed, whether they're a football player, they're in a fraternity, or whether they're, on a hockey team, like that, like you said, that zeal that they had for the party life in the sports world, they want to see their team saved. They want to see their dorm saved. They want to see the floor saved. They want to see the campus saved. And I think that's just, like you said, a launching pad for so many individuals to, when they do land that marketplace job, or if they're called into ministry or missions, they are equipped to do that. And they have the ability, because they are able to evangelize, which is sharing their faith. They are able to disciple, and because they've been discipled. And when we see that multiplication process, it's just so fun to see and hear. And I'm sure throughout your experiences, you've been probably invited to dozens, if not hundreds, of weddings throughout the years. Just the people that you've been able to disciple or witness to, whether like we were marrying young couples already, we've done marriage mentoring with them, and now some of them are having kids, and they've walked through some good times and bad times. And it's just amazing to see, like, when you get to do life alongside people, and when you love them like Christ loved them, just see their desire to do the same, to have that multiplication, not division approach, is so fun. And that's one of the biggest blessings I think about being in ministry, of what I've experienced thus far. And when it comes to young adult ministry, you've been around it for a long time, Steve, and I'm so glad you have. What do you wish that every young adult knew when it came to Jesus and the church itself?
And when you say church, are you talking about the local church, or are you talking about the worldwide body of Christ? What are you referring to there when you say church?
You want to take it. If you want a big church, or if you want to get them mobilized to the campus and a church nearby that's worshiping, whatever route you want to take it, you go ahead.
Well, I probably have a broad view of the church. I think there's only two groups of people on the planet. Those who are part of God's family, and those who are not yet part of God's family. I think he's trying to mobilize one group to reach out to the other group. All the other labels and brands and divisions and that have been created are more man-made than they are God-made. So I think God has an expression of the church, big C, all over the planet in ways that Americans don't even understand or realize. I mean, I just got back from 2 weeks in Ethiopia, and we're working with college students, we're working with missionaries, but going out into the rural areas, into these little tiny villages, just a dirt floored hut, and here's the father of the family, who former Muslims, and now he's the pastor of the church, and other young people were coming into our little service, as we were holding these in different locations. I thought, Americans, we think church is about buildings and budgets and staff, and no, the majority of the world know nothing about budgets or buildings or staff.
Right.
They just know, and these people had nothing except Jesus, and we've got everything except Jesus. And so anyway, I think we can learn something from our brothers and sisters around the planet. That's one thing that I'd love for this generation to understand is who is Jesus and what does he want from us? And really, that's all you need in life. All the other things, all the trappings that Americans especially have, it can actually be a great deterrent to really knowing and following Jesus. So when I start my small groups with some of these non-believers, I was working on starting a group even this morning of 6 guys that are non-believers, fraternity guys, and I call them, these groups, the Immortal Six. One of the guys said, "Do you mean to name this the Immoral Six?" I said, "Well, that might be more appropriate, but no, it's the Immortal Six. We just have some fun with our names." But they've never opened a Bible. Many of them have never been to a church, and so when they come, many times we'll do a John study, and really John was Jesus' best friend, and so we just read a chapter of John. I provide the Bibles and the pens and the paper. They just show up, and my wife fixes some breakfast, and boom, we're off to the races, and it's a great discussion because we're only looking at 2 questions. It's not teaching. It's purely discussion. But, chapter 1 of John, we read it out loud together, and we're just answering 2 questions. who is Jesus? And secondly, what does he want from me?
Mm.
And you'd be amazed, young men who have never had any exposure to this at all, looking at this for the first time, and really addressing the two most important questions on this planet that any young person, any person of any age needs to address: who is Jesus? And secondly, what does he want from me? And so it's such a simple study, simple discussion, and yet God uses the Word to shape them in those two fundamental questions. So that'd probably be what I'd want any one young person to wrestle with at this stage or any stage of life, and to realize that here in America, we've added a lot to Jesus. We've added a lot to the gospel. And if we can peel back all the baggage, all the extras that we've added to Jesus, the scripture says if he is lifted up, he'll draw all men to himself. And so how do we somehow lift up the pure, unadulterated, Jesus without all the extra American baggage? I think some people in these other countries, like Ethiopia, may understand that even better than us. I hate to say it.
I love it. I love it. And you've mentioned, recently traveling to Ethiopia, you've also got such a unique ministry and vantage point of seeing a lot of different collegiate leaders and ministries in a lot of different local churches and expressions across America too. And I'd be curious, a similar question, Steve, but what do you wish your peers who are maybe a lead pastor or serving on a board and they're a passionate Christ follower, in your generation, what do you wish that they knew about the next generation?
Well, we have the most biblically illiterate generation that we've ever had. My own grandkids, they have a screen in front of them almost all times, and the advent of Netflix and the internet and all the entertainment options, and it's much more exciting, tantalizing to us than an old book that's 2,000 years old full of rules, and so and part of that saddens me, but part of that excites me because you kind of get a clean slate. You get people who are not necessarily inundated or inoculated with religiosity or what they might grow up, because the most committed Christians are the ones that start from scratch. They, here in the South especially, everybody thinks they're saved. We have to work hard to get them lost before we can ever get them saved, And so that's probably one of the things I'd love for my peers and other pastors and leaders in the church to understand is, let's go after the non-believers. Mm-hmm. I was talking to a leader, a national leader here recently, and I was talking about the difference between a ministry and a movement. And we're trying to help ministries all over the country, especially college ministries, but not just those, not just be satisfied to be one more ministry, but what if you could become a movement? I've probably been on 500 campuses over my lifetime, and virtually every one of them has multiple ministries, but seldom do I see a movement. And I say, do you want to be ministry number 16 on your campus? Or would you rather be movement number 1? Good. Well, one of the characteristics of a movement, whether it's through a campus ministry or local churches, you start with non-Christians. And this leader just jumped out of his seat. And they've got staff all over the country, and he goes, we are through reorganizing Christians. We are done reorganizing Christians. And so that's what a lot happens. That's what a lot of ministry is. It's reorganizing Christians, bringing a new worship leader, bringing a new preacher. You got, exciting, Dunkin' Donuts or, whatever it is that's pulling in the new crowds. And we pat ourselves on the back that we somehow are successful and the other groups are not. No, I think the successful ones, this is what Jesus would do. I think he would go after those non-believers. And what we've realized is that's the seed bed for a movement. It's what Rick Warren did at Saddleback. I'll be at Saddleback with him and a group of leaders next week. He just retired from his church there, but here's a guy that started from scratch with non-believers.
Yeah.
And no wonder that has now perpetuated and multiplied. He modeled what his converts were to do. And so I think this idea of being a go to them church rather than a come to us. That's what I had about 100 pastors and ministry leaders in Addis Ababa last week, and they were asking questions. How do we rearrange ourselves in our church and our denomination to reach the country and the world for Christ? Well, number one is, don't be a come to us church. You got to figure out a way to be a go to them church. And that's easy to say, hard to do, especially when you're been entrenched for years after years after years of just kind of providing programs at your church and opening the doors, hoping people will come in. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
I'm so glad you went there, because Josiah and I have a unique story in our short amount of time doing ministry together as a married couple, in essence, compared to many individuals we've talked to. And the unique thing that you just said is very real. So we were both on staff at a church in 2 different states, got married. Josiah's on staff. I was volunteering with the young women's side of things with young adults. And to have that model come to us, this is our event, this is our church, this is our Sunday service. And to break that mold, we started doing campus ministry. We were on campus for 5 years at a local college campus. And it's exactly what we had experienced. We always say, come to us. And I look at Josiah, I was like, no, we need to go to them. Like, us stepping foot on their turf, their territory.
That's right.
Campus, asking to sit at their table. And not to say, here I am, I know Jesus, you need Jesus too, but to earn that right to speak into their life and to earn a seat at their table, just out of curiosity of who we were on campus, consistent faces, people who walked around and prayed, people who offered friendship, that piqued their curiosity of who are you and what are you doing here? So they increase that. We're going to decrease their fear that we're not here to intimidate when we step onto a mission field, onto a college campus, wherever God's calling us, into a different country, for crying out loud. Decrease their fear. We're not here to change you, but Jesus can. And we're going to increase that curiosity of what he's doing and
that's good, and
what he's done in my life, because he could do the same for you. And I think that's just amazing to kind of just unpack that mindset, because it's not reverse ministry. It's just doing ministry a different way. And if we're so used to the systems and the things that are scheduled, we forget that every day, at least on our college campus that we were at, was a mission field.
Yeah.
And you didn't know what was going to happen, who was going to be on campus, if we might get kicked off or out. Kind of when you go into a country, we just went with open arms, open hearts, of saying, we're here to love like Jesus loved, and we're here to point people to Christ in the process. And if you want to come along with us on Thursday night, we want to invite you into our personal home to just sit at our table now, and just to see doors of friendship and opportunity open, and around a table with food and conversation, like you and your wife have opened up your place of just 6 people grabbing breakfast, discovering, uncovering 2 little questions. Wow. Every single person is one invitation away of saying yes to Jesus, though.
Great point.
We underestimate the power of an invitation, because we're scared of we're going to get rejected. But when Jesus said, if they reject you, it's because they rejected me first.
Yes, good
breaking
point.
out of that mindset mold of church, how we do it over here on a Sunday, which is fine. But wow, living on mission with a missionary's heart is a completely different battlefield at times. So that's just me unpacking what you just said. But
no, and look, you can't spell gospel without go. Right. It is a go message. It is not to be contained. It's not we've got to go. And so I'm picturing, Steve, just some young movers and shakers who God maybe has given a dream. Maybe he's actually specifically placed it in their heart to start a movement, or their heart is racing because they're listening and watching right now. And they know that they're called by God to be a generational difference maker and a spiritual strong shepherd. And I'm thinking of them. And I want to talk with you about the God ask for a second. because Micah and I have served as campus missionaries. Now we're 3.5 months into launching a new ministry, and it's a nonprofit organization. So many times, whether it's planting a new church, starting a new ministry or movement, I love that word and the distinction there, but also it could be a campus ministry movement. When you're starting something new, it's like it's going to take some resources, some gas in the tank to get there. So what would be your advice to a young leader with that God vision of a movement, and how could they raise some funds to go do what God's asked them to do?
That's good.
Great question. I think to get into their prayer closet to start off with and say, God, what is the vision you've given me? And really have that solidified from the Lord. Not all the specifics have to be in great detail yet, but this is what you want me to do with my life, God. And then I think test that a little bit. With many counselors, there is victory, is what Proverbs says. And so I think I would go to a few key people, maybe especially those people that could potentially be major stakeholders for you. They have wisdom, but they may also have resources. And so give them a chance to weigh in. There's a principle that is kind of human nature that if you give people a chance to weigh in, they're probably going to have more buy-in. And so who would be those 3 or 4 or 5 people? Yes, friends, pastors, spiritual leaders type of people that can evaluate what you're doing and your vision and give you input and guidance and wisdom. But I think I would also think through who are those 3 or 4 or 5 people that I would like to go to and share my vision, but and ask for support. But right now, I'm just going to them strictly to get their input on my vision and to really have them throw questions at me and try to shoot holes in this thing, because that'll shape it. That'll help shape it. I brought a wild, crazy ministry idea about 2 years ago to a couple. And I was going to ask them for $1 million for this wild, crazy ministry idea. And boy, did they shoot it down. And I kind of left with my tail between my legs walking out of that meeting, because I'd known them for a lot of years. I was close to them as friends. But it really made me think through and pray through, my wife and I. And we decided to back off, not strictly because of this one couple, that one conversation, but what they said and the questions they asked were very insightful, very powerful. And so I don't think we should underestimate the role of kind of input, wisdom, accountability as we're shaping that vision. But I think you can also plant the seeds for support raising, even as you're forming that, even as you're getting counsel. And even there, I wouldn't pull the trigger quite yet. I think then I'd probably go to a second level of people, and I'd gather in my living room, and 10 or 12 or 15, some of those mid-level potential givers, and I'd lay this idea out, and we're praying about this. What do you think? What are your questions? But then I'd probably even send an email out to a broader list of 20 or 30 or 40 people and personalize it. We're thinking about this. We're praying about this. We're not just going to announce to everyone, God has called us to Thailand, send your money now. No, it's a process. And it's a slow, wise, involving, including, letting them weigh in, which you're going to have some great input from them, but hoping that that will cause some great buy-in. And I tell them on the front end, I say, no, I'm not here today. I'm not here to ask you for any funds. Down the road, yes, but today I want your wisdom. I want your honesty. I want your toughest questions. And I think if you can go through that process, it can be kind of a little baptism by fire, a little bit. But of those 3 levels, the major stakeholders, kind of the medium stakeholders, and then kind of everybody else, I think it's going to refine that vision in ways that you'll be glad you went through, and then it's going to form the foundation for some great support appointments, I promise you. So that'd be a place to begin. I wouldn't be quick to form an organization. I mean, you guys apparently have formed a 501c3, is that right?
Yep.
Well, you're already experiencing, all the documents and paperwork and IRS and having to form a board and bylaws. And, If God leads you to form a new organization, do so. But to me, that's kind of not a last resort, but just there's so much management that goes into that in a sense takes you away from the grassroots ministry that you're trying to have. So so that would be a decision too that I would go very slowly with, that I actually feel like I'm supposed to start a brand new 501c3 when there's already tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of them out there. But that's kind of another conversation. But that would be part of what I'd be asking these counselors for, is the idea of starting an organization. And some of those individuals may end up being board members for you.
Mm-hmm.
Spot on. And Micah and I, during the process, this is what it looked like. Exactly what you had outlined is before we ever pulled the trigger or made any announcement, it was a few years of stirring. And it was many months of prayer and fasting and meeting with potential board members, meeting with kind of the people that we knew we needed to meet with, kind of your group.
Yes.
We said, there's a group of people we need to meet with and just get. Then there's some people we should meet with, kind of that list.
Yeah.
And then there's people that we could meet with as time allows or as their interest is so. But I love that. And looking at it from a lens of Proverbs, of people that we need to meet with, that we should meet with, and that we could meet with, and to not make any rash decisions. Like, for example, this podcast, we had probably recorded 3 years, around 180 episodes before. And then, of course, too, there was a period of about 2 or 3 annual conferences and a weekend for young adults from our state and area. So, I mean, for us, I ask you this question just because we're a few months into what's been going on behind the scenes for years too. But I think that it's so good to have that vision, to know that you've heard from God.
Yes.
Invite people in the process. And I heard it this way. I'd be fascinated to know if you'd agree, but sometimes if you ask for advice, you walk away with money. But sometimes if you ask for money, you walk away with advice.
Good point. Great point.
Have you ever felt that?
Of course. Sometimes you get both.
And that's a good day, my friend.
That is a good day. That is a good day. Well, I think also, I think you're going to run into people that love to help startups.
Yes.
They love to get hold of young visionaries like you all. They love to get in on the ground level. That maybe they're the ones that, first invested in Amazon or something, or Tesla or something. They like to get in on the ground floor of things, and they're willing to take a risk, which I appreciate, and I love that. And so, a fresh visionary, a fresh vision, if you can explain it in real simple, powerful ways in real concrete ways, not just say, we're just going to go to airports and pass out tracts and hope that people come to Jesus. Well, they need some real specifics, as to what your plan is. It needs to make sense. And how you're going to measure success. I'm not trying to take the Holy Spirit out of it, but, they're used to having people put investment opportunities in front of them, or business plans. I had someone put a business plan in front of me yesterday, but boy, they had done their homework big time. Well, it impressed me. And so you're much more likely to invest in something where someone has prayed through it, they've thought through it, they've gotten the counsel, and they can really outline what the steps are, what the metrics are going to be, what the outcomes are going to be, what the practical steps are to accomplish this, what the resources needed for this. And you go, wow. I think it's one reason why Artaxerxes and Nehemiah there was so favorable to give Nehemiah everything he asked for and more, because Nehemiah had thought through every detail of what his plan was. I think the king was very impressed. And so when Nehemiah finally, asked the king for resources to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall and to rebuild the people, well, he let his key man, his key servant go and gave him everything and more that he needed, and was gone for years to accomplish that. I think part of it was Nehemiah had really done his homework.
I love that. That's a good visual. I just want to encourage the listener, even if you find yourself that maybe, like Josiah said, God's giving you a dream or vision, to take what we've even talked about into consideration. Who have you let into that dream, that process, that prayer? Because we need a prayer team sometimes to come alongside us. We need the resources to be alongside us. And I guess maybe you're holding on to a dream and you don't want to have, I call them Joseph moments, where you don't want to have a dream or vision from God. And then in the story where Joseph goes to his brothers, like, someday you're going to bow down before me. I had a vision of all the wheat bowing down. And so we want to be mindful of who we share our visions with.
That's a great point. Great point.
Just pray for discernment. God can give us wisdom. We need to pray for knowledge. We need to pray for discernment. And if you have a check in your spirit to not share something too soon or with an individual, I would encourage you, keep holding on to that prayer. Don't put it on the shelf and forget about it, but really take it to the Lord in prayer, and don't leave until you hear your next step from him. Like, get into the throne room with Christ. And if you need to wrestle with him and wrestle through some personal things, do so, because we just talked to some friends that we believe that God has put a burden, a passion inside of you to make a difference somewhere around this world, or somewhere in your community or your family. And you sometimes need to fight for that. And we know that Joseph, even in his example, he did fight for those dreams. But I wonder if he could have a go back moment, if he would have been quiet in that moment. But then I don't know if he would have been where he ended up. So God knew.
Great point. Great point.
Let's just be mindful of who we share those things with, but don't hold on to them till your last breath and wonder what if either. So it's the tension of discernment. We get to manage, right? And Pastor Steve, I'd love to hear, I know your heart is evangelism for young adults, and just processing life with them and sharing with them and starting ministries with non-believers to see them thrive. And like you said, see that movement really take place and lives transformed. And for the listener who may not know elements of your story or like some things that you've written, can you just talk about and maybe unpack your heart behind the writing of The Fuel and the Flame for us today?
Sure. Thank you. I had been, I guess, doing ministry since the 70s with college students, and then full time in the 80s as a college pastor, and then starting this ministry called Student Mobilization, or STUMO. And so we loved college students. We wanted to reach college students. And I guess I've been fishing around, looking around forever, trying to find some sort of a book that could help you in some real basic practical ways to start and develop and grow and multiply a college ministry. And I just couldn't find it. There were some great ones out there about evangelism. Bill Bright with Campus Crusade had written one, and about disciple making. Leroy Imes with the Navigators had written one. Walt Hendrickson, Disciples Are Made, Not Born. So there were some good, but something focused on college students and college ministry staff. And so we had formed an organization, a 501c3, and here I am telling you not to do it, and I did it myself. But
because you know how much work it is.
Yeah, that's right. Right. I can tell you what not to do. Right. But they kept after me, the board. Well, you need to write this book. You need to write this book. You need to write this book. Well, I had never written anything really. I'd done articles and stuff like that. A web zine for Focus on the Family, I remember. But it was so that was a big task for me to think through from scratch. It was, we completed it in 2003, so it's been out for almost 20 years now. But God used it. I mean, it had this divine wind behind it. Some things we produce just sits on the shelf and gathers dust, but some things we produce just has a divine wind behind it. And so sure enough, lots of groups out there, and then it started being translated in some different languages, were using it and really being blessed by it. And so probably 3 years ago, I was feeling the need to really redo it, to really revise it, to bring in a younger leader, a friend of mine, a coworker, Paul Wooster. You all are friends with Paul.
Yes, we love Paul.
And he has a background in college ministry, of course, and still heavily engaged. And we're doing all kinds of projects together, really. But But I said, let's totally redo the fuel and the flame, and let's really update it. And instead of using words like groovy, let's use words like chill, or something that's a little more relevant and modernized.
Right.
And let's new stories, and Paul's injection was so valuable, and so we totally redid it, totally revised it. The original one, I was confused. Was I writing this for staff or for students? And you're back and forth page after page. Who's this for? Well, we took all the staff stuff out of it and made this one just for students, shorter chapters, discussion questions at the end. And so it kind of takes college students through 5 major themes. One is, what is God's vision for your life? Secondly, what kind of personal and spiritual foundation do you need to build to accomplish this vision? How can you start witnessing to those around you? How can you start discipling those around you? And then lastly, how can you become a world changer? How do you launch out to really impact the world? And those are the 5 major themes, and that's going through that. And so it's been a fun book, and it's been out maybe a year and a half now, this new version, and it's already in its 4th or 5th language, I think. And I was in Ethiopia, and they had maybe 1,500 copies of this book, and one of the guys was with me was videoing, and I mean, they were just descending on this table like locusts because they wanted a copy of this book, and this is the cover, I said it looks a little feminine to me, yellow and pink, and you sure guys are going to like this, oh, guys will like this. Besides, Shadrach, it's not pink, it's salmon. Oh, salmon. Oh, I see. Okay, salmon. But anyway, you can tell how out of sync I am. I'm still listening to Elvis and the Beach Boys. So I give a lot of those decisions over to the next generation, like Paul. Yeah. And so Paul is in his mid-30s, I'm mid-60s, and so I defer to him on a lot of things, and that book is one of them. And now he and I are writing one for staff. We're writing one for staff. We think we're going to call it Ministry to Movement, and we're just going to see how many different church-based and campus-based collegiate ministries around the world might view this as a valuable asset for them. So
there is such a need, Paul,
yes.
For Paul, what he's doing, and also for you, what you're doing, Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to lean in just a second to talk about Paul for a second, because we love him.
Sure.
And he describes you as one of his mentors, and just also a co-laborer. And I think of the young movement leader who might be listening, who's looking for somebody to link arms with. Talk about your friendship, mentorship, and leading together with Paul, and maybe even with in mind the young leader who's looking for a mentor.
Ooh, that's good.
Well, the older I get, the less I want to lead or manage. I just want to serve, to be honest. I can start a ministry. I can get it up and going and growing. But if you leave me in charge too long, we might be in trouble, really and truly. And so that's been the history of my life, is getting something up and started and going, growing and multiplying. But I'm looking pretty early to turn it over to a younger leader and let me just be a resource. You must increase and I must decrease, And so, I'm thankful that I know that about myself, and that I've made some mistakes along those lines. And someone asked me what my greatest strength was a while back, and I thought about it for a moment. I said, I think my greatest strength is that I know my weaknesses.
Yes.
And some people don't know their weaknesses, and you'd like to tell them, but you're not sure they'd be open to your comments, right? Yeah, I think I'm realizing that for me to actually do something, some activity, some ministry role, and it could be done by another leader, especially a younger leader, I'm literally robbing them of the opportunity. So I'm not looking to, feather my resume or add speaking engagements. I'm at a point where I only want to do what only I can do. I want to come to that, and you're probably at a point like that yourself, where you're at a point where you want to have some convergence. You know your sweet spots. I want to do what only I can do and give away everything else. And so Paul started contacting me probably 10 years ago. He had started that ministry at Chico State.
Yes.
And I think he had gotten a copy of The Fuel and the Flame, I think. And so he would just, as the early days of Skype or Zoom, and so he would have his whole college ministry leaders in a room and me up on a screen, and we're interacting with his leadership. And so that just began a friendship. And then when it came time to rewrite this book, I knew I wanted to ask him to do that. And he did an awesome job. He's just so gifted and so capable. And he really is the real deal. He lives what he speaks. And so, he uses some strong language about me, that I'm his mentor and all this kind of stuff. No, we're just buddies. We're ministry buddies. One interesting verse that I'm no Greek scholar, I can promise you that, but a key verse for you all and for us, and certainly it's a key verse for the navigators forever. 2 Timothy 2:2, and the things which you heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. Well, Paul uses interesting words, in that section, what the word soldier is, and has a concept of strategy. But that word entrust is a banking term where you're taking something of great value that God has given you. And of course, it's the 17 years of teaching that he had received by hanging around Paul, right? But now depositing it in the heart and the life of another believer. And so you can't do that. I had one guy say, I'm discipling 20 men. Oh, really? Is that right? Well, Jesus only did 12, and one of those guys bombed out. But hey, if you do 20, more power to you, bro. But that word entrust is in the middle voice. And in middle voice, active voice is, I'm hitting you, Josiah. Passive voice is, I'm being hit by Josiah. Well, middle voice in the Greek language is that we're hitting each other. So that word entrust, I think Paul used it not only because it was a banking term, but he used it in the middle voice to say it's not a one-way street. When you're discipling someone, it's just not you saying, yes, my son, sit down at my feet and let me teach you. No, it's a relationship that's there's mutual benefit to it. There's a mutual entrusting and mutual sharing that's going on. I think if you can have that kind of mentality with those that you are mentoring or discipling or training, that you're really there to serve them, not to lord it over them at all, and that it is a relationship. It's direction, yes, but it's also affection. And those are the two key rails in your discipling. I think that's what Paul was trying to communicate to Timothy, really.
I'm taking notes. So if you see me
it's so good.
I'm writing some stuff down.
It's really incredible. And I think if you are looking for somebody to become buddies with, that's a really great goal, both if you're older looking for somebody younger, if you're younger looking for somebody older, and just being intentional about starting those conversations and be a person of the first move.
Yeah, I think that's so good. Oh man, so many good things I could say right now, but we want to honor your time, Pastor Steve. And guess what? We've come to 5 in 5. So this is 5 minutes on the clock, 5 questions. Are you up for the challenge?
Of course.
Of course. I love that. All right. Question number 1. Should I kick us off?
Kick it off.
All right. Here we go. What's one thing you're doing right now as a hobby, maybe outside of the ministry world?
Well, I'm trying to get in shape. I go to a friend's garage. He's my medical doctor. He's an old STUMO staffer. He's an old Razorback football player. So 3 times a week I go there, and he scripts out every exercise that I'm doing, and he has reshaped my body and my fat content and muscle content and everything else for the last 2 years, and I'm kind of a different man than I was 2 years ago. So I'm just going to stick with that the rest of my life. I pray I can, because it's hard. But if you have a partner, 2 are better than 1. They have a good return for their labor. I could have never done this on my own. But so that has become a pretty important part of my my weekly schedule is all the mainly weightlifting, free weights that we're doing together. That's really made a difference for me.
I love it. That's a great answer.
Definitely. And you've mentioned like sports and exercise. Do you have a favorite college sports team?
I'm afraid I do. Do you recognize that little thing right there? That's an Arkansas Razorback. So there I was Saturday night in Razorback Stadium with my son and his wife and his oldest son, cheering our hearts out for the Razorbacks. They play Texas A&M this Saturday. I don't know when this episode is going to be broadcast, but we're playing one of the number one teams, Alabama, I think, after that. So Arkansas has this is the third year in a row they have the hardest schedule in all of college football because we're in the SEC West. And so, but we've got a great coach and we've got a good team, and I think we're going to have a good season. And so I follow the Razorbacks. That's where I went to school, and we've lived next to the stadium off and on for years. And so anyway, it's fun.
That's good. You're a fan for life. That's good.
Yep.
All right. Question number 3. Here's the curveball. If you could ask Josiah and myself one question today, what would you ask us?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would probably, ask you, who have you shared the gospel with? Who have you led to Christ in the last 6 months? And please don't answer that. But I run into a lot of Christian leaders, and I'm not saying to y'all, and seminary professors and pastors, and that they're teaching and preaching, and they want to be Christian leaders, and they're even talking about the Great Commission. But if you ask them to really get practical, down in the weeds, okay, who are you currently witnessing to? Who have you led to Christ this past year? Who are you personally, individually discipling? They kind of don't have good answers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Steve, you don't understand. I have these responsibilities, and I'm doing this, and I've got this. Okay, but give me just one name, would you please? So anyway, that could be an intimidating question, and I dare not ask it in front of all your audience like this. So.
I'd prefer you did. We need that. We need iron that sharpens iron, and we need to, like, when we launched this new ministry 3.5 months ago, I realized, okay, we're not going to be on a college campus every single day.
Right.
And there's part of our ministry is investing in leaders as well as reaching young adults for Christ. But it was a major point that we talked with our board about, like we want to be mentoring, discipling, and one-on-one, opening our home on Thursday nights for college students. And I look at right next door to having spiritual gospel conversations with our neighbor Jesse, and just loving on him, bringing monster cookies. He and our other neighbors helped us unload this crazy size swing set that barely fit in a U-Haul, but we found a screaming deal on Marketplace. And so we're trying to love our neighbors and not become in a bubble. And I'm reminded of that today.
Right.
I pray that it's a lifestyle determination, that this is our mission. And aside from a paycheck, like let it be relational, one-on-one.
Good.
So good.
And back to you, looking at question 4 or 5. I would just love to ask you this. I know you did a lot of traveling even recently, but if you could go one place you haven't been and bring any snack with you, where would you go? What would you bring with you?
Well, I'm actually heading to a bucket list country in about a month and a half, to Egypt. I've never been to Israel. People say, well, you want to go to Israel? Well, yeah, I'd like to go to Israel. Yeah, but I'd really like to go to Egypt. I guess I'm a history buff.
Yeah.
And so much things I've studied over the years and enjoyed over the years are kind of Egypt related. So I'm going to be spending probably close to 2 weeks in Egypt, working with a lot of different groups there in mid-November. And but a snack, I'm a sucker for a honey bun. If you could have seen me last night at midnight, I won't tell you which news station I had on, as to not reveal, which news I tend to listen to or watch, But there I was with my buttered honey bun, and I don't tell my wife, but I was drinking milk out of the carton, and eating my honey bun that I had heated up with butter all over it. Probably 1,000 calories or something. I'm going to have to go this afternoon and work them all off
in the garage.
Yeah, in that garage, I'm going to work off the honey buns. But probably Egypt and honey buns would be my two little answers to that question. So
I love it. That is so good. All right, here's our last and final question. And if you could leave the listener with one piece of encouragement today, what would you leave them with?
Ooh, these are great questions. I think it's something you all touched on about relationships. We can pursue all kinds of goals and objectives and, try to accumulate all kinds of education or possessions or build our resume or, everyone's wanting to build a following now, all their social media following. That's the new pecking order. We raise chickens on our property, just not as a profession, but just to be able to give away eggs and stuff. And you that's where the word came from, pecking order, is you see the roosters, you see the hens, and no, there's a definite pecking order, and so that's where we are as a society, is trying to gain those things for ourselves. But in the final analysis, when we're laying on that deathbed, I know this is a morbid way to finish off the podcast, sorry, but what are we going to be thinking about as we're laying there? I want to be able to turn towards a world map and see people's faces, country after country after country after country, that somehow, some way, maybe God had used me to lead them to Christ or disciple them or launch them into ministry or missions. But maybe even more than that, you're going to be thinking about, who did I love?
Yes.
And who loved me? And the greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13 it shows us, that in the final analysis, we can accomplish and attain all these other things, but who did we love and who loved us is going to be probably the thing that'll be uppermost on our mind and heart in those final days and minutes, moments of our life. And so we can start now. We can now work our way backwards and say, okay, who am I loving? And who are the people around me that truly love me? And not waste any opportunities along the way to love and be loved. I think that's what life is about.
That's so good. I think it's a great challenge to leave every single one of our listeners on, and us on, who and how are we loving, but also what legacy are we leaving behind? Is it a legacy of love and commitment to Christ and commitment to others? Or is it something not so pretty and we have an opportunity to change it? So beginning with the end in mind, I think, is essential, whether you're in ministry, marketplace, on a college campus, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, is what do you want to be said of you, and how are we living out Christ each and every single day when we come across our neighbors, our friends, our families, a stranger? It's not a morbid thought. It's a challenging thought. It's something to leave the listener with, and to us. We don't want to wrestle with that question. We want to be able to answer that question and to answer it well. So,
and I'll just close by saying this morning I was downtown Minneapolis at North Central University, and the president, Scott Hagan, was meeting with the freshmen of the campus, and he started talking about the distributed life. And his quote of the day was just this idea that life isn't going to be something that you accomplished. It's about what you set into motion. And so this side of eternity, thinking of Hebrews too, like you might not see the ripple effect of your life until the other side of eternity. And so focusing on what lasts forever, focusing on what matters most, and watering the earth in the process, bringing the gospel. I'm invigorated anytime I'm around Paul, and now when I'm with you, Steve, of like, let's go. There's lost people who need the hope of the gospel, and we have it. And what an opportunity to bring it to them as a messenger.
That's right. Amen.
And if you're listening and you want to find out more about Steve Shadrach, as well as the God Ask or the Fuel and the Flame. We will put those links and make them available online and in the show notes. And until next time, this is Josiah and Micah with Young Adults Today.